for being with us today and our technology partner roundtable. What we're going to highlight is ProFound Technologies capabilities related to Zoom ProAV design standards. So we're going to take a look and learn about this advancement in the industry having to do with standard room types that are configured and designed in conjunction with Zoom and in this case ProFound Technologies that enable easier ways, certainly less costly ways to implement Zoom technology in a variety of room types, whether it's a small huddle room, but also, and more importantly, these larger and more complex use cases where you want Zoom, but you also need to think through, how am I going to get the audio quality? How am I going to have the design standards to roll these out, particularly in the mid-sized business up to enterprise space? How am I going to roll these out so they work right every time, have the reliability and the support necessary? And so what I'm going to do is a brief introduction, and the meat and potatoes of the presentation is going to be showing a couple specific use cases of ProAV rooms, so that one of the primary takeaways that everyone gets as a result of this webinar today is just to understand them, to know how to access them. And in the case of those that work with us, again, we have some IT partners, some consultants, and some integrators. If you want to communicate these with your customers, or if you want to circulate this within your organization, you can do that. A couple of just general notes on the webinar. Today's webinar will be recorded and made accessible to you after the recording. I would ask, we're going to have everybody muted during the webinar, the main portion of the webinar, but anyone has a Q&A or a question, post that in the Q&A box. You'll see it on your Zoom, and we'll get to those at the end of the webinar. Runtime should probably be about 35 minutes, 40 minutes maybe for the presentation, and we'll leave 5 to 10 minutes for questions at the end. And for those of you who are brave enough to last the whole time, listening to me and Gabe, we are doing a raffle. So I think it's going to be $50 or something. Maybe next time we'll do Bitcoin. But for now, I think it's going to be an Amazon or some sort of raffle. So thanks again for everybody for joining us. And we'll do that at the end. Darla will help us with that. So as far as background, we are a Zoom Gold certified integrator. You'll notice that little emblem here on our deck. We're one of only 2 Zoom Gold integrators in the United States. There are other integrators throughout the country, or throughout the world, in Asia and in Europe, but we are one of only 2 and are very proud to have that distinguished relationship with Zoom. Host today, myself, Kevin Buzza. I'm COO at ProFound Technologies. I have 20+ years experience in the technology field, worked at an internet service provider, designed networks, network security, moved into audiovisual, and in this company I've operated in a lot of different capacities, technical sales, operations, project design. So that's a little bit about me. I'm delighted to have Gabe Gonzalez, our head engineer, joining me today. Gabe and I work closely in a number of different capacities. He has 14+ years in AV installation, has done some of our most high profile implementations. He handles the AV team management, engineering, and project management experience. Gabe, maybe just kick it to you to ask a question. I mean, we're talking
Sure.
Zoom today. Can you maybe give us an example of a semi-custom or something tricky that involves working with a native Zoom experience, but involves having to need the expertise of a Zoom Gold certified integrator?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the native Zoom user interface is fairly straightforward. It's very fluid, and it gives users all of the items they need to run a meeting. So beyond the meeting itself, you run into additional environmental needs that require further custom integration. One of these items would be lighting, right? So you have particular, acoustic concerns in a room. You have particular design concerns in a room. One of which is lighting and shade control. So whenever you start a room, you want to make sure you're in an optimal environment, which also involves, creating a particular lighting scene, and as well as drawing some shades. So very recently, we received a request from a Zoom engineer to come up with a custom script to control a set of shades for a client. So we're in the works of setting that up and integrating it into the native Zoom user interface.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is a good example. I'm involved in that too. And so for those listening in, that's an example where many of us might picture the Zoom interface. I mean, we're probably most of us on our device, our laptop or our mobile device right now. But within the room, running Zoom Room, you have the ability to customize that experience, and it involves some scripting. It involves the ability to know how to work with the admin privilege to customize that, and that's something that comes into play when looking at Zoom professional audiovisual type rooms. Continuing along, just a brief background, just so you know a little bit more about our company. We've been in the audiovisual industry for over 20 years. We support commercial, government, and residential. Interesting fact, we've done a lot of large-scale estate homes, but that's not the majority of what we do. The majority of what we do is support commercial and government customers solve technology integration issues, making complex technologies simple and easy to use. Our systems are running all over the country as well as internationally. Here are some of our references, our government references, Pentagon, Fort Knox. So we were trusted with where they store the gold. And you can see some corporate and law, the list goes on. So the point being, we have a variety of different verticals or different markets that we're familiar working with, and that's value to you. As far as recent Zoom implementations, I think that it's important to understand that there's a lot of different ways one can skin the cat. And so I thought to myself, why not prepare a few different, little vignettes to talk about, what we're seeing in various types of Zoom scenarios. So Jollibee Foods is an international conglomerate that we have the privilege to work with. And what I thought was interesting about, their environment is working to grow their Zoom standardization, but a lot of different applications. You've got large training rooms. You have these open air environments. You have the desire to run Zoom on a mobile cart. So many different things going on there. Then we have Penn Mutual, which is another kind of example where we were brought this situation where they wanted to take a training room and bring Zoom into it. So then you've got this notion of multiple microphones. You have the idea of how are we going to lay out the speech reinforcement, the speakers, that sort of thing. And so we had to tailor that as well. And then we have this Imperial Dade example, which I thought would be a good question for you, Gabe, which is this idea that someone just gets a Zoom room and hey, it should work, right? Just load it on the Zoom, the Nook, God bless. But we had someone contact us. What were some of the things we found?
Well, when we arrived to the site, it was kind of a blind call. So we didn't have any, existing engineering diagrams. We didn't have any idea of what the system was comprised of. So what our field engineers did initially was a site audit, to where they went through the entire design. They checked all the hardware. They verified that it was all functional. And then from there, they kind of dove a deeper layer in and just vetted that the design was functional. So once they got into it a little deeper, they found that some of the devices that, were primarily deemed set it and forget it type devices, had a tendency to keep disconnecting. So the end users were kind of at a loss, to where we don't always expect end users to be that technical and troubleshoot the systems. We want them to walk into the room and just have it work immediately. So what we're able to do was propose some solutions to solve that issue, and it turned out to work fairly well. But it kind of reminds us and also reminds end users that considering that design from like a spatial environment perspective, as well as defining the end user's real needs early in the project, really goes a long way with continued design.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and in that particular example, you know, just the peripheral management and folks that are joining with us for when we look at the application drawings, because we're going to look at real world engineering application drawings to show these ProAV designs so you can kind of conceive of them mentally. We're going to point out a couple of those points of failure and why it's important, potential points of failure, why it's important to have a competent, you know, technology partner that can help you with those so that those things don't fail. Because what we're talking about is a highly capable platform, which is Zoom, running on a commercial grade, you know, compute device, you know, an Intel or an Apple, you know, processor, but then you have USB devices and sources coming into it. They need to be managed, need to be engineered in an appropriate way. And so we're going to talk about that once we introduce the idea of standardization. So we're just a couple slides away from getting into the core aspect of today's presentation, which is to introduce you to a couple standard ProAV designs. But let's just briefly talk about why standardization is important. So I think that, you know, these are some of the items that came to mind as we were preparing here at ProFound Technologies. One is that it's designed and tested. What does that mean to you and to stakeholders that you represent? Well, these designs have all been pre-built. They've been bench tested and certified within a lab. As well, they're comprised of components that we support as an integrator. We're certified, we maintain our certifications. And so there's a lot of value there versus what has happened sometimes in the past with other integrators is, you know, build the you know, plane, so to speak, as you take flight. The benefit here is that they're designed and tested. Naturally, having something that's been designed and tested adds efficiency in the implementation. So it's most efficient to roll out standard-based designs because, after all, it doesn't need to go and to be engineered for the first time. I mean, yes, there's going to be site-specific engineering, but for the most part, there's a lot of efficiency there. There's also this concept of improved TCO. I think we know that concept, but total cost of ownership. So predefined systems reduce the cost of ownership and therefore drive the return on investment. Many of our customers are seeing the value of doing Zoom rooms. And when I say Zoom rooms, I mean in the physical meeting room environments back at their office that has laid dormant here during COVID, but they see the value of bringing Zoom into the Zoom room. And it's important to our customers to know that they're maximizing their return. So when you use these standard systems, because they're very efficient and we've kind of cranked down on the design from a minimalist standpoint, they're also cost effective. And so it drives the return on the investment. And then there's one final aspect, which is where ProFound really looks to excel on our customers' behalf, and that's expandability. Gabe, can you comment on, though we have standardized approaches to different rooms, what we mean when we talk about expandability and this notion of the ability to do more later?
Right. So when we design, I mean, when it comes from a custom perspective, we find very frequently that clients, they get into a room design, and as they use the room for 6 months to a year to 2 years later, their needs expand within that space. So, you know, companies expand internally, and, you know, their requirements do as well. So one thing that we really prevent, well, try to prevent, is limiting that expansion capability for an end user. So what that means from a technical aspect is that we design systems, and, you know, we also kind of bundle them together to where if you need to add some additional inputs and outputs to the system, if you want to add an extra display to a room, if you have to add an extra, you know, computer input, we give you the ability to do that without, you know, having to sacrifice major components of the system or pay twice for hardware. So that also kind of echoes back to the improved TCO aspect that Kevin mentioned previously, to where our predefined system designs are expandable. So the total cost of ownership kind of improves in that aspect as well.
Absolutely. Good. Thank you for that, Gabe. So now an introduction. We're going to move into the standard room types, which is the highlight of today's presentation. So here's some examples. And this is to say, there's a variety of different ways. This is a partial list, by the way. There's a variety of different ways that you can outfit a room. And so we have conference rooms of various types. We're going to be showing the 7 to 13 person conference room as part of today. There's a larger one that's 9 to 19 people. It may seem somewhat arbitrary to pick those sizes, but it kind of works in real world practice to see that there's going to be a little bit of concentric circles there where, you know, it could be borderline, but as the room grows, different requirements are introduced. And so we have a couple of different designs to accommodate these type conference rooms, as well as huddle rooms, which aren't represented on this list. We also have production studios, which is a very hot topic with our customers. You know, everybody wants to, you know, have their, you know, YouTube channel and be able to make that connection with their customers through content that they can maintain and easily record. And so we have a very cost-effective production studio that can handle 2 to 5 persons for short form or long form interviews and has adequate lighting and capabilities with the high definition camera recording. There are all hands spaces, which are similar to the training rooms, which is the next item. And it's going to be our second highlight today when we look at, you know, practical applications. And then there's a variety of other room types, hybrid classrooms. You know, these days, some teachers are, you know, teaching in the classroom. School is back for some, others not quite fully. And hybrid classrooms is something that we're doing and seeing a lot of. And what that means is, you know, the teacher can teach in a normal capacity, but then when it's time to, you know, run the classroom in a complete cyber format, the Zoom system integrated with the piece parts required is there to support that use case. So one of the questions I came up with, Gabe, I thought would be maybe good to have you comment on is, I think some people ask, you know, you've got these smaller rooms, and I like that maybe from a budgetary perspective. I'd like to put that in my larger room. Can you comment on the details that make the packages, you know, appropriately sized? What's required?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So when you look at the conference room types, when you have 7 to 13 people, 9 to 19, and, you know, 2 to 5, et cetera, we typically design the number of participants based around a typical commercial furniture design. So a lot of office environments now have, you know, huddle room spaces, which is a smaller amount of people, and that kind of sticks to a particular amount of seating in that room. So what we do to maximize budget and maximize effectiveness in environments like that is that we kind of tailor the system to accommodate a particular seating space. So a huddle room, although it may have a very large TV, will be designed to have camera and microphone. It's only really outfitted for, you know, a smaller area. So when you apply that to a larger area, you get a much different outcome. So those tiers, from our perspective, allow our end users and our clients to effectively budget, not only for, you know, one office site, for example, but it also allows them to take that design moving forward and apply it to multiple sites. So what you have, once you apply that idea, is you have multiple sites that are outfitted from a budget conscious perspective, and the system design is also the same. So if you have end users and they travel site to site, they have the same exact experience in New York as they would in Los Angeles, and they know what to expect. So that way the confidence of a video, you know, video conference that they have coming up, whether it be sales based or technically based, you know, all of their attention can lie into the meeting and not getting the meeting to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for that. And I should mention at this point, all of these standard room designs are built into Profound's proposal system. So if you're working with an account executive or interested to learn more, it doesn't take a lot to represent for you what your options are and what the budgetary options would be. We've kind of optimized to try to give you the ability to have all that information as quickly as possible, along with the scopes, so you can understand what is the narrative, what's included. And so with that said, let's dive into our first example of a room. This is the one we just saw a slide or two ago, which is the ProAV conference room, 7 to 13 people. So let's look at this. Room type, obviously, ProAV room, size 7 to 13 people. What is included? And don't worry if it's hard to conceive of some of these things. I'm going to show you actually a elevation of the room, and I'm going to show you an application drawing. So you're going to actually see a rendering of what this room would look like and be able to picture it that way. But ProAV conference room is just a professional configuration that's going to have 2 displays, in Zoom. And I think a lot of us know this, but, one for the local, content and one for the far end talking heads. It's ideal, I should say, if the space in the room provides, is to have 2 displays. So we have 2 displays in this design. We have a single HD pan tilt zoom camera, PTZ, gives you the ability to move the camera about within the room. We have 3 tabletop microphones. You could do ceiling, but let's keep it simple. And then we have this digital signal processor, which is going to just handle the mic audio and mix it down and appropriately handle the signals from 3 different mics, so that what we hand off to the Zoom room is a high quality microphone experience. We'll also have some ceiling speakers that are then connected to the compute device, as I say, but your Zoom room computer. And in addition, there's some other options that we have that would be the iPad for scheduling. That is again, a native feature of Zoom, that you could just add an iPad as a scheduling device, mount it outside, and you're good to go. And then another component, which we'll see when we get to the next slide, is the whiteboarding. So if you take a touch-capable display supported with a Windows 10 PC running Zoom, you can enable that for whiteboarding, and then just allow that to be sensed by your room, and then there you go. You are, in other words, able to share your whiteboarding session right into Zoom. So let's look at this together. Here's the ProAV conference room, and let me just bring up my annotator. We'll just point some stuff out as we go. But up here is the sound bar, which is going to give the audio reinforcement within the room. I think in a moment, when we go through with Gabe, you can comment on why you may want something else. Here's your camera location. You see your 2 displays. And then on the table, we have 3 wired microphones, and then your touch panel. And then over here is a cart that has the capability of mobile cart, that you can wheel this in and wheel this out. This could be your whiteboard that could be shared among a few different rooms, for example. And so this is your ProAV conference room. There's things that can be tailored. There's things that can be changed. Gabe, it looks pretty standardized, but maybe talk about some of the decision trees of where you might put customizations, where you might assign budgets based upon customer preference.
Sure. So rooms like this, although the actual size of the room might be consistent across different corporations and buildings, the actual construction and acoustics of the room always tends to change. So what that means from a design perspective is having a system that is expandable, enables us to kind of pivot and adjust our systems to work for all these various spaces. This space in particular, looking at the general layout of the room, it poses a couple challenges, right? So the table is fairly standard as you look at it, right? But then you see a very large glass wall along the far end of the room. So, hanging a TV to a glass wall in ideas is not a great idea. But, we kind of provide additional solutions such as a cart-based, idea to where now you can move this display to any point of the room and, have it in the space that you want it. In addition to that, we can't really see the ceiling in this room, but the open architecture is a new and more popular design in office spaces, but that also, kind of makes you have to pivot and change the speaker design for an area. So you can go with a design like this, to where the speaker is actually at the front end and mounted above the displays, right? So that kind of saves you some dollars in budget, as well as gets you a proper audio solution in the space. But there's many different environmental aspects that we kind of tailor these package systems to work just the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can think, for example, if this were a corporate boardroom and one where the customer wants to make an impression, there's a number of different things we can do. Just looking at the displays in the front, adding something larger, more interesting from a display perspective, a video wall, for example, which would be just a large, pixel map. That's something we're seeing a lot of. But again, for the folks, join with us today, this is the example of the ProAV system for the smaller end of the commercial conference room. And then here's that application drawing. So let's go through it. For some of us, this will look pretty simple. For others, maybe not. And so we have the displays, which are on the right side, I think probably most obvious. And then we have the pan tilt zoom camera, definitely an important component in a boardroom where you need that high resolution quality. You need that ability to zoom in and listen to that, CEO or president make that comment. You have the sound bar, which is above the display. Like-minded people may disagree on whether that's a good idea for a room of that size, but we work with our customers to work through that and communicate, what are the advantages and disadvantages. In the center of this application drawing, you notice the compute devices, whether it's a Mac or if it's a PC, that's what's running the Zoom Room instance. And then as we get to the bottom left corner here, we have a networking device to manage those devices that are on the Ethernet network that are powered over Ethernet. And then we have the microphones, 1, 2, 3, very basic, room table-based microphone, but we could do something different, such as ceiling microphones. That's often a request to keep the room kind of open in nature. And then we have this DSP, which is taking the signals from the microphone, mixing them appropriately, and then, as you can see here, handing that off to the Zoom computer, making sure that we're managing this communication, and the quality of the mic is very important. It's in many cases most of the meeting, if you're sharing the content and speaking. So in one sense, a very simple solution. In another way, Gabe, there's these optionality or ways that we have to think about the corporate network and managing that with our customer to make sure the implementation is smooth. Can you comment on accessing and the piece parts related to managing that properly?
Absolutely. So designing the network components of a conferencing system ahead of time enables us to provide continued services for our end users. So a system like this, it's a fairly current design, and a lot of the AV components nowadays are also networking components. So they operate the same way as end user laptops do, cell phones, to where they have network access, and then that's also how they talk to each other. So we approach it, one of two ways, and that depends on the client's needs. We can segment all of these devices for our more security-focused clients, to where all of these devices operate internally to the room and have no access out to the World Wide Web, aside from the Zoom PC itself. And the client manages that particular PC, and they get that level of security and from a networking perspective, and they also get that level of encryption security through the Zoom portal as well. So the other side of that is a fully managed and monitored AV network. So being that most of these AV components are network devices now as well, that enables us to constantly monitor them, monitor their status, and as well, diagnose the health of a particular conference room or system, whether it be a daily basis, quarterly basis, annual basis, what have you. So that, in turn gives us the ability to get ahead of problems for the client. So, for example, if a camera in a room like this tends to lock up or fail hardware wise, or needs to be replaced, being the integrator, we find it important to set the systems up to get a notification ahead of time. That way we can get ahead of the problem and notify the client before the problem becomes, a lingering issue for the client and
Agreed.
affects one of their conferences.
Agreed. Thank you for that. And just to reiterate, that's something where we're getting that request a lot, because, and I might touch on this when we get into managed services later in our time today, but there aren't very many cases where corporate IT or a company exposes its network or its enterprise technology to non-technical user use and abuse. But conference rooms would be an example, right? People are frequently coming into these rooms. It's valuable to secure them. And one of the things we can do at the Zoom room level is monitor the devices, reboot the devices automatically, but then we can also, monitor the IP devices over the network through our managed services platform. And that's important to some of our customers. Moving on, this is our second example as we're orienting today's webinar towards an introduction to the ProAV room standards. And this is a training room. So we just went from conference room to simple conference room to now very complex training room, and you'll understand in just a moment. So we can work with existing or new, because after all, even though Zoom's very cool here over the last 12 to 18 months, particularly, there's a lot of systems that are out there installed already. So one of the things ProFound prides itself on is coming in there and kind of picking up, dusting off, and reclaiming the technology that you have. So this room solution will work for training rooms, about 30 persons in size. We recommend 2 wireless mics. Why 2? Well, primary presenter can use the handheld or the lav. We could add more. Plus, in this example, we're going to have 2 ceiling microphones. You'll see why in a moment, so the audience can participate. We'll have other basic concepts that are in the other rooms, such as amplification and speakers, and a digital signal processor that, again, handles managing the mic signal and connecting that to the Zoom room so that the audio is discernible and high quality. And again, we're going to show a drawing here, so it might be difficult to imagine, but we have an environment with 2 outputs on 2 sides. We're going to have dual displays behind the speaker and then dual displays hanging above the audience. From there, there'll be a camera that's mounted beneath the displays in the audience so that we can have eye level view of the speaker, something very natural for those that are joining remotely. And then with the components I mentioned, such as the wireless microphones, we're going to be able to have that be the primary audio for the voice lift, which will come through the speakers. And then also we're going to have microphones that can pick up the audience. So a lot going on here, but let's take a look and see what this actually is. And again, this is a pretty huge advancement in that, having these training rooms pre-designed, pre-engineered, and ready to go. This used to be the thing, and unfortunately still is in a lot of realms where integrators don't have the expertise that they, take 5 weeks to design this. At ProFound, we can have this to you, within the same week at a preliminary stage, not with the architectural customizations. But let's look at this drawing together, and you'll notice a few things. You'll notice the speaker in the front, along with the microphone that I had mentioned. We have our 2 displays behind the speaker with the camera above. Camera above is going to capture the audience video. And then in the ceiling, I'm going to point out here, you see the ceiling speakers throughout the room to give adequate sound reinforcement. And then these little dark gray rectangles that I'm pointing out, those are actually microphone, ceiling arrays. So there's, I think, maybe 8 different, microphones that we use and configure to point to the audience to probably give us, a few hundred square feet of very high quality pickup within the room while maintaining a very, out of the way, discrete kind of experience. And so let me clear my drawings here and let's go to the next image here. And this looks like it's the presenter's view, right? So now it's you standing at the podium. You can see this camera that I mentioned earlier, which is going to give you the ability as a presenter to just look naturally in the direction of the camera and be captured for the far end. And then as a presenter, as you might imagine, having the content right in front of you, along with the images of those that you're meeting with, provides confidence. That's why we call those confidence monitors. So that's inherent in this design as well. And so now you can kind of better picture, what is a training room. So let's look at the application drawing. So there's a lot going on here, particularly for non-technical users. I joke, this can look like a Chinese newspaper. So there's many different aspects involved here, a boatload of more complexity. You can see the displays here in the right side. And then we're also seeing something that I don't think we saw in the first image, and it's these little boxes, they're connecting to the camera and then going into the Zoom room. Gabe, can you comment on points of failure and just talk through how these larger systems do introduce that and how we manage that appropriately?
Sure. So the idea of points of failure is an approach of engineering design that we typically try to stick to. And what it consists of is decreasing the amount of boxes that can fail in a particular system. And what that means is hardware is hardware, and these are mass-produced items, and that kind of rings true no matter what type of electronics you get into. So there is a margin of error, margin of failure to hardware to where it just needs to be replaced. So within a particular system design, the more pieces to the puzzle you have, the more likely that system is to fail, right? So it's just like a box of puzzle pieces. If you lose a couple of puzzle pieces, now the whole system doesn't work. And we try to decrease that and in turn increase the reliability of the system and functionality of the system. So for example, a lot of these pieces and parts can easily be consolidated to function the same exact way a room otherwise would.
Mm-hmm. No, it's good. Thank you for that. Yeah, and I'll just point out as we're trying to take the time to introduce, this entire room type, I mentioned the displays and the cameras. We're going to manage the USB signal and work to basically optimize and reduce the points of failure because all of this is coming into the compute device. And then we're going to put, ProAV components to, at this point, handle the splitting or, this is a DA, to take the video signal and deliver it to the displays. There's a lot of other things going on here. We've got the ceiling speakers. We've got a number of different mic inputs. We have a higher performance microphone DSP to handle management of the signal. And so just giving an introduction of everything that's in this room, and you can see it's very complicated. So it's probably a good idea to have a technology partner that can help navigate that and avoid the pitfalls. So at this point in the presentation, we've kind of covered the meat and potatoes. So I'll maybe just conclude this part by saying, why is it important to pick the right technology partner? And I think it is worthwhile to take a moment to look at this. ProFound is a gold certified partner. We've gone through a rigorous certification program with Zoom, hundreds of hours. As well, we have the references and proven experience working with Zoom, so we can properly implement your room system. In addition, and I'm glad that I've had Gabe join us today, we have the engineering staff and a number of engineers that work for Gabe that can perform the pre-planning and analysis, the site-specific and on-site network configuration to deliver a completely commissioned Zoom room system. So we back all this up with our warranty support if something goes wrong. But then as well, we offer managed services, which is a huge trend, which we'll get to when we talk about trends here in our conclusion, where our customers want the phone support. They want the ability to have an emergency resource, and they want annual preventative care because of the end user abuse that happens, as I mentioned earlier. Again, people constantly using these rooms, something will go wrong by that alone, in addition to technology failing. So managed services and support, just a brief sketch on that. If you're with us, and I see a couple customers here with us today that already know this, and are working with us, I should say, and is how they know us. Do you have a full-time Zoom admin? These are important questions to consider. Nowadays, to leverage Zoom's full capability, it's good to have your IT staff certified, but if you don't, and you need someone to help you, queue up a webinar, configure your Zoom room to do the advanced control that Gabe mentioned in her introduction, that could be worthwhile to have a technology partner where you can access us. ProFound provides that support. Who handles your tier 2 ticketing? Someone calls and says that it's not working. A lot of times that's triaged by an IT help desk person, but who's going to be dispatched? Do you have someone for that? That's something that ProFound can handle. And then do you have phone support to enable meeting users if they need additional training? We pride ourselves on having a training component and the ability to provide further room enablement, and that's part of our maintenance programs. And then, as I've mentioned already, we do provide annual maintenance services. So to kind of sum all that up, the Zoom license, which we're using now, I'm broadcasting this webinar and it's live streaming some places, that works really well. You're experiencing my audio and my video and it's coming through. So I'd say the Zoom license is among one of the most reliable portions of an implementation. However, hardware and network devices, points of failure are an issue and they're subject to user abuse. So planning for adequate maintenance support is important because then you maintain a stable room availability and a consistent performance in your environment. I won't get into this, but we have a variety of managed services plans that we're happy to talk with you about. Pardon me. Now, just wrapping up, this is our conclusion. We're just going to do a brief marketplace update and then go to our Q&A. As I prepared for this, these are the items that came to mind. Zoom proliferation, naturally. I don't think that's news to anyone here, but here's an interesting graphic on my right side. Zoom user daily meeting participants has skyrocketed since December 19 to a projected amount, because we're not in April 21 yet, but we do know this data point is projected to hit 300 million. That's tremendous. And so we talk about the Zoomification of the world. That's not something that we coined, but we feel like to a certain extent it's Zoom's world and we're living in it. And so we are preparing and continuing to innovate around Zoom's platform because we think Zoom is, is the biggest thing going in the collaboration space right now. As far as next subject, Teams growth. You joined today to learn a little bit about Zoom, but Teams, Microsoft Teams is growing steadily as well. And while not as fast as Zoom, very close. And so we at ProFound are working on different Teams-based solutions to handle that growth. And that's something we'll come to in a minute. I want to ask Gabe some thoughts there. BYOD conferencing capability. So picture this, we're talking about rooms where you can join and have a native Zoom experience, but some people don't want that. They want the ability to come into the meeting, plug something into their device, and do whatever meeting type that they want. I mean, after all, while Zoom is, prolific right now, there's still tens of millions of people on Teams, tens of millions of people on WebEx, log me in, 8x8. And so BYOD conferencing is a very important concept. And I think that for those of you interested, we have a bevy, stable of room solutions very similar to the ProAV standards we shared today, where if you want to have a solution in a room that allows you to stay platform agnostic, we can deliver that too. Coming back to
so
go ahead, Gabe.
I just wanted to touch on the BYOD and the platform agnostic point that you had there. Um, Zoom is ahead of the pack right now, and Teams is there as well, um, which is fantastic for end users and large corporations. But over the course of the past decade or so, we've seen this shift to where a lot of the systems that we design currently, being platform agnostic, as well as um, being able to match with a native conferencing environment, gives our clients the flexibility to accommodate just about any platform. And that's very important to us, that we provide systems that are going to last a number of years, um, outside of wherever the market may be going. So we put a lot of attention towards.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Gabe. And then I think the last marketplace update, then we're going to move to Q&A. So if you haven't already, folks, I direct you to the Q&A function at the top of your Zoom bar, or the bottom of the Zoom bar, and type any questions that you have. And then after the Q&A section, we'll wrap up with the raffle. The final point on the marketplace update would be the ability to do larger rooms, larger scale rooms with simple and easy to use standards-based approaches. I think that's a bit about what we've talked on today, is these ProAV designs. This is something that, a couple of years ago was simply just not possible, but just with the advancement of the Zoom ProAV standards and some of the more robustness that Zoom can offer to do semi-custom or custom customizations, as we mentioned throughout today's webinar, it's here today. And so I think that's a huge trend. So we don't any longer have to feel that we can't deliver, a native Zoom or even a native Teams experience for our customers that have that appetite to deliver that solution in a training room, in a multi-purpose room, in a divisible conference room. And I think that's an important concept. So yeah, let's wrap up here at this point. I want to thank everybody who's joined us, and let me see what questions we have. All right. This question says, with managed services offering, can newly released Zoom features and/or updates be included to roll out to the Zoom rooms covered by the MSA? Yes, we can do that. As I mentioned, it's really limited to what admin privileges you want to provide to Profound. If you give us a user account and provide us access to certain rooms, then we can log in, we can do the update, we can actually lock it down to not update until the periodic update schedule, which you may like as a policy decision. We can also go in and set the room to monitor certain devices and notify us if something goes bump in the night. And then we can also schedule, the device to reboot, which, running a reboot on a system periodically is not a bad idea. And so we do that for certain customers. So thank you for that question. And then I'd say we have time for one more, because we've gone a little long, and apologize for that. But does Profound provide training and how to use the rooms after they're installed? We do. Actually, I have one more question that just popped in here. I'm going to try to answer. Training, yes, we do training manuals, or continuity manuals, as our government customers call them. We can do training videos. A lot of times we do a basic knowledge transfer at the end of the implementation. These are all options. Generally, it's a basic knowledge transfer that's included as a training line item in our training. But if you want actual flipbook or PDF, version, we can do that as well. Can we manage all? This is a good question from Terry. Can we manage all Zoom rooms from a central console? Well, if you have the admin privilege, you can see all the Zoom rooms and navigate in. There is the Zoom dashboard, which you can get some valuable information. But the single pane of glass to manage maybe a second level down within the Zoom experience, I don't think that's there yet. So a console, no, but on an individual room basis, if it's configured as I've mentioned, you will have that. It comes into our managed services department, gets tracked through our ticketing system, and we can handle that. Gabe, did you have something?
Yeah, I can touch on the other layer of management there, as far as managing all the devices. we kind of touched on that earlier, to where we do have an offering that gives you, a full list of all of your Zoom rooms. If you're, a corporation that has multiple conference rooms, to where you can, see a dashboard of all of the devices in each particular room, and manage resetting them, manage their IP settings, and view all of the the health level of each of your spaces. That way, once you layer that with scheduling and calendaring, you can ensure that your end users are going to walk into a room that's fully functional before a meeting.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Gabe. I completely missed the question from the standpoint that we at ProFound offer that through our central management system, but Zoom itself does not. So you can achieve that working with ProFound. I think I'll conclude at that point. Thank everybody for joining us. I'll hand it off to you, Darla, to do the raffle winner.